Today on the PitchBook podcast, Zach is pitching Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, and I am pitching Smarter, Faster, Better by Charles Duhigg. Batter up! Zach, how are you? How was Thanksgiving?
Very thankful. It was good. It
Good.
was
You
fun.
went just saw some family, normal Thanksgiving.
Pretty traditional
Traditional.
potatoes, turkey. Yeah, I've heard people are kind of breaking away from the traditional Thanksgiving dinner and they're just making steak.
Huh. Interesting.
You heard that? No?
My wife has wanted to do like something different, like make some Indian food. She makes amazing Indian food. Um, but we haven't done it yet. However, I was on a cruise over Thanksgiving, and so you had a choice of like a traditional Thanksgiving dinner or a steak, or there was kind of a ham version of the Thanksgiving dinner.
Mm.
So it was interesting because you're at the cruise ship and they're serving you, and it's the meals take like 2.5 hours. It's just so long. They're good. That's great, but yeah, it was a little different. Kind of nice not to cook, but it was definitely fun. So,
How do you rank your protein?
what do you mean? Like, what do I like best?
Yeah. Like what's at the top and what's
Here's
at the
it.
bottom?
Here's a good
Like
question.
give me your
Okay,
your
this
top
this
five
this
top
is
five
too.
proteins.
Okay, well, the funny thing is, we asked the question: if you can only eat one type of meat for the rest of your life, what do you pick? Do you pick pork, chicken, fish, uh,
Steak,
steak, whatever? Not steak, but beef.
cow,
You
beef,
go beef. See,
beef.
I'm thinking maybe chicken just because it's so versatile. But pork is pretty good choice too, right?
Pork is
Like
good. What
you can have
about
some
just
pulled
bacon?
pork, bacon. Yeah, I would not do just bacon for the rest of my life.
The rest
Uh,
of your life would be very short.
yeah, I don't know. Flavor wise, you're probably right. I'd go beef, but I think chicken's just the most versatile and easy and lean, and I don't know. But
You can do a
that's
lot with chicken.
yeah. So I'm
Yeah.
not a fish guy. I'm not a seafood guy. Are you a seafood guy?
Some seafood.
Okay, so
It
I
just
yeah.
depends. It depends.
I'm not like a crab or lobster guy. I know that's like blasphemy to some people, but I do like shrimp, and I do like tuna fish and stuff, but and halibut. I'll have some fish and chips, but not after that. I'm pretty much done. I'm not a salmon guy. I don't want to have little bones in my food. It's not for me. So
Yeah. Yeah.
that's
I
my opinion.
agreed. Yeah. Yeah. I'm not big on the fish.
Yeah,
Not a big fish guy.
yeah. So
Speaking of, how was Uncle Al's tacos a couple weeks ago? They
oh,
did
it
a
was
fundraiser
amazing. Yeah,
warming the children.
exactly. So I brought, it was actually kind of nice to get rid of a bunch of old coats and stuff. And I know
Cool.
he takes socks and mittens, and I'm like, I don't have a lot of mittens. We did get rid of some like kind of wool hats. They're just kind of sitting around doing nothing. And then we got rid of a bunch of coats. Got rid of, that sounds bad. But we donated them. Like I don't know what giant dude in elementary school is going to need a, 2XL coat from me, but whatever is what it is. And then of course he was serving tacos, and um, they were great. Like he's just cooking up on his little Blackstone, and
Mm-hmm.
people were talking. It's good. So if you do need some catering, whether it's a wedding, I don't know, party, whatever it might be, definitely check out
Yeah.
Uncle Al's Tacos. It was delicious. So highly recommended. So thanks for coming
And
on,
just
Alec. We appreciate it
yeah, great guy.
for sure.
Does some great work. He's out there hustling.
Absolutely, he
Him and
is.
50 Cent.
Nice. And then just a quick wrap up on the cruise. We went to Mexico out of Long Beach, 2 days in Cabo and a day in Ensenada. And yeah, Cabo we really like. Ensenada, not the greatest. If you've been to like the Blowhole, La Bufador, if you've been there once, you don't need to ever go again. We just kind of hung around the city, went shopping, and not didn't actually we went and got we my wife and I and my sister-in-law we got a massage, like a 90-minute massage for like
Nice.
60, $70 or something like that,
Oh, that's
which was
great.
pretty good. And then we just walked around and shopped in Sonata. But Cabo was fun. We went whale watching because it happened to be the right time. That was pretty cool because there's, mom whale and baby whale kind of chilling around. That was fun. So it was good. And then just a reminder, coming soon, my mom and sister are going on their trip to Antarctica on their cruise, 17-day
Oh,
cruise. So in January, I've committed both of them to come on and talk about their trip to Antarctica.
I want to hear all about it.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun. I think they leave in like a week, and they're gone like almost to the end of the year. So should
That's
be
so
should
cool.
be should be
Okay.
interesting. So all right, so let's get rolling. I'm excited. Meditations, Marcus Aurelius. I think probably there needs to be some background. Some people will know Marcus Aurelius if they watch, especially if they just watch Gladiator 2 in the
Oh,
theaters
I haven't
now.
seen it. I haven't seen
Yeah,
it.
it's good. It's decent. I took the boys to see it and we enjoyed it. It's a little ridiculous, but it is what it is.
Not
Anyway,
as good as the first.
I barely remember the first. It might be better than the first, to be honest, but
The first one was awesome.
I
With
didn't
Russell
love it.
Crowe?
Yeah, it was
Really?
fine. It was fine.
What?
I think it was overrated.
Oh, come on.
Oh, anyway,
Gladiator?
it was fine. It was
It was
fine.
so good. All right.
Okay.
All right.
Anyway, all
It
right.
was
So
good.
tell us about Marcus because he is prominent in the Roman emperor thing.
Yeah. So, all right. So, a little bit of background to this book. It's been around for, well, at least it was written almost 2,000 years ago. So, Marcus Aurelius, he was born April 26th, 121 AD in Rome in a prominent and noble family. He was known as one of the five good emperors, and he was very good at keeping a journal, writing down his thoughts. That's why they call it meditations. The book was never intended to be for public distribution. It was just his own private thoughts. And the book really revolves around Stoicism. So if you just Google or Chat GPT Stoicism, you'll find different philosophers like Marcus Aurelius. Although I don't know that he would call himself a philosopher. Maybe he would. Epictetus, and there's several others
Hmm.
that talk about this philosophy of Stoicism. So around 1600 AD, his writings were put into a book format and were actually published, and they called the book Meditations. And it's broken up into 12 books. They're kind of short, they're not very long. They do feel like journal entries, but he's talking to you as the reader. So, however, the translation happened, I believe it was written in Greek, which at the time was the more intellectual language to speak. They translated it, but as he's talking, it's like he's talking to you as the reader, although it feels like he's talking to you. And so it feels very personal,
But
like
he's in theory talking to himself, right? Like,
he's talking to himself. Yes,
yeah.
like
Okay.
exactly. So there's a lot of you, and when you think about just like you're having a conversation with somebody. So it was published. He influenced a lot of people, a lot of different philosophers like Immanuel Kant, Waldo Emerson. This is this is a book, Matt, that I read last year,
Okay.
and I'm rereading it again this year. And I think it's a book I'll probably try to read every year. It's only 160 pages, very easy reading. The text is not dense, but the thoughts, like I find myself, I'll read a few pages and I'll just stop, and my mind will start to think about how I behave and how I interact
Hmm.
and conduct my own life. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you might want to briefly mention Stoicism, what the philosophy is, kind of your own words, just so people aren't
Mm,
confused. Because
okay.
I mean, I'll give you my version, but you've actually read the book, so
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. Well,
my version
I'm
is
still learning. It's like it is a philosophy that you apply in your daily
yeah.
life. Go ahead.
My version is that basically you don't let things phase you. You control your emotions. For I think one of the examples is if you're sleeping outside and you don't have a blanket, you're like, oh well, this is just a good test for me to see if I can handle the night without a blanket, handle the difficulties in life, basically, um, as they come, as a way to kind of grow as a person. That's my understanding, but you can fill me in if I'm incorrect.
I think that's a pretty good summary. One of the things that he says is to be tolerant of others and strict with yourself.
Okay.
Focus on you. And if when you focus on you being good for your society, being a good instrument, a good influence, although influence isn't necessarily the goal, but being a a pillar of being a pillar of strength and not getting too agitated by outside forces or outside situations. Like you said, sleeping outside with no blanket. That's a
Right.
good example. It's like, this is the situation I'm in, and I'm
Just deal
going
with
to
it.
deal with it. I'm
Yeah.
not going to complain. I'm not going to whine. I'm not going to
Right.
blame it on somebody else. Like, hey, you forgot this or
Yeah.
that. You just are going to move forward. And
Gotcha.
I like that approach to life. If everyone minded their own business and just focused on this on themselves, we'd have, I think, a dramatically different world. It really is a good approach for life. And it's not religious,
Sure.
although he references the gods. Like he'll say the gods
Yeah.
this or the gods that, but it's not a religious book. It's just how to conduct yourself in society
Yeah.
and in your life and how to make the most of bad situations that you're in. So here's I don't know how many principles you want to go through. I've got a few here.
Go for it.
I'll give you a few. Okay. All right. So the first one is accept what you cannot control. We were just talking about that. He said you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. I would just say, how many times in your life have you been really annoyed by something? And once you just accept that it is and move on, you can dwell on that bad thing for a very long time. But once you accept this is the situation, we are where we are, we're going to move past it. But a lot of people, it seems you can't just move past it. You're kind of dwell and get stuck in it. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that principle.
Not especially. Keep going.
Okay.
I
All
think I'll
right.
chime in. I think I'll chime in when I feel like I've got something
All right.
brilliant to say.
Second principle, focus on the present moment. Aurelius advocates for staying present and not worrying about the past or future. This principle highlights the importance of living fully in the moment and dedicating oneself to the task at hand. So not thinking too far out into the future, dwelling on the past. Right now we are recording this podcast and our duty is to make it the best podcast that we can.
Okay, but
So being in the present.
and I get that, but what about like your future goals and denying yourself things so that you have a better future, saving money? You know what I mean? Like there's kind of a an argument to be made about thinking about the future.
Yeah.
I don't know if he
I
talks about that or if you have some thoughts, but I get what you're saying. It's like, yeah, the podcast I should probably focus on what you're talking about, instead of letting my mind wander to what I'm going to do tomorrow
Exactly.
night or whatever.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but there's something to be said for like, okay, deny, and then maybe he talks about this later, denying yourself certain things to
Of
have a
course.
better
To
future in the, you know, better future, I guess.
yes. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know that he talks about the future saving money now for a great future later. But he does
Sure.
talk about self-discipline, self-control, how much time he gains, who does not look to see what his neighbor says or does or thinks, but only what he does himself. So that comes
Yeah.
back to
Yeah, I
focus on
get it. I'm
yourself.
not trying to like overly make it overly complex. It's just interesting because you, but he's basically saying like, I don't know. It's sometimes it's just hard to stay in the moment. Like,
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't really know what I'm
it
saying
is. Well, it's easy to let your mind wander.
for sure.
Earlier this year, I was trying to meditate for 20 minutes a day every morning
Hmm.
without thinking about anything. I
Yeah.
was really trying to clear my mind of any thoughts. Have you ever tried it?
Uh, I have, but it seems like lately, whenever I talk or hear about meditation, it's more like let your mind wander and don't like worry that it's wandering. Sorry, wandering. That's
Hmm.
kind of it seems like that's the philosophy lately that I've read. I don't know how to.
Like let your
It,
mind go where it
yeah,
wants to
just
go.
where it wants to go, that's fine. Just I don't know. That seems to be like the new mantra, I would say, for meditating. And I feel like when I was younger and I first hearing about meditating, it was like having nothing on your mind, and it's almost like you
Yeah,
punishing yourself by thinking about something. So I don't know how
correct.
I'm at, I have tried and it's not easy at all for me, obviously.
No, it was very,
It's
very hard. I would set my watch 20 minutes and I would find myself 5 minutes in thinking, did I set my watch? And I'd want to open my eyes, look at it. Okay,
yeah.
okay, I said it. I said it. And then your brain starts thinking about your day. You start thinking about what's
Hmm.
ahead of you and just clearing your mind. Maybe that's being too present and taking that really literally, but I believe he was talking about the task that you're doing right now is the most important task. So
Yeah.
when you're doing that task, focus on the task at hand. I don't think he would agree with you don't need to plan for the future.
No, yeah.
You kind of have to travel there to, to plan and kind of, plan out your days. But anyway, so being present, here's one quote I thought was really good. He's got just a ton of great one-liners. Nothing that goes on in anyone else's mind can harm you, nor can the shifts and changes in the world around you.
Yeah.
You worry
That's a
about what other people think about you, Matt?
no, I definitely don't. But I don't have I don't really have that issue. I know there are a lot of people who do that, but what I would say is it's it's hard to not let maybe not thoughts, but maybe the things that are happening around you affect you, if that makes sense. Like
Uh-huh.
you have something bad that happens or whatever. It reminds me of I a few times I've heard people like that are, they're in prison, like that's fine, I'm in prison, you can restrict me physically, but my mind can go anywhere it wants and you can't control my mind. And it's like
Yes.
that's a great saying, but like it's tough for me to connect with that because it's like well, that's pretty rough. Like if you
Oh,
physically can't go anywhere, you know what I mean? Like how do you like you I don't know.
here's a quote to that. You ready?
Yeah.
All right. He says, people try to get away from it all, to the country, to the beach, to the mountains. You always wish that you could too, which is idiotic. You can get away from it anytime you like by going within. Nowhere you can go is more peaceful, more free of interruptions than your own soul, especially if you have other things to rely on. An instant recollection, and there it is, complete tranquility. And by tranquility, I mean a kind of harmony. So keep getting away from it all like that. Renew yourself, but keep it brief and basic. A quick visit should be enough to ward off all and send you back ready to face what awaits you. But what's there to complain about? People's misbehavior, but take into consideration that rational beings exist for one another, that doing what's right sometimes requires patience, that no one does the wrong thing deliberately. So he kind of makes an argument to travel within your own, wherever you are, you can find tranquility
Yeah. I might argue that no one does the wrong thing deliberately is not correct, but or not true.
from their
But
perspective, right? They
sure,
may not,
yeah,
they might.
well, yeah, that's true. But I just, yeah, what anyway.
All
No,
right,
I get it.
last,
I just I like that he says make it brief and whatever instead of just daydream all day.
yeah, yeah.
So
Choose not to be harmed and you won't feel harmed. Don't feel harmed and you haven't been.
yeah, I mean I like that. I think it's hard to do, but
Very hard to do.
yeah.
So it's just, it's a great book. I like the idea, the ideas that are presented in the book is I go about my day. Last night I was working on a project and the computer that we were working on just crashed. So we'd allocated time to work on this project. The computer crashes. And it's like, well, there goes the night. And then I go to work on this other project, take out the work that we were working on, and it didn't turn out the way that we wanted it to. So your mind wants to go to a place reflexively that's really negative. That was a waste of a night. Why didn't this work? Why didn't that work? Could we have planned better? Could I have done the work better? and I've just found myself because I've been reading this book at the end of the night, I was like, lessons learned tonight.
Mhm.
Now I'm going to go to my bed. And then I'll wake up tomorrow. It will be a new day. And
Yeah.
I'll battle tomorrow, you know?
Yeah.
And so I just like that thought of whatever comes your way, be strict with yourself, tolerant of others, find ways to not complain, find ways just to accept and move forward, not hold grudges.
Mhm.
Um, a lot of good insights.
Yeah, that reminds me briefly of a quick story. So I've been laid off a few times in my different various careers, and a couple times, one time I could kind of tell it was coming just because of the situation and my position in the situation. But the other time I was totally blindsided. But I basically was like, okay, well, it's a small world. I'm gonna be as professional, be professional. Just deal with it. It's gonna be okay. It's gonna ultimately be better for me. To kind of try to have like a good attitude, even though it's one of the most difficult things that is gonna happen in your career when you're in charge of a family. But that's one of the rare times that I feel like, oh, I actually am stoic right now and not worried. Uh, I'm
Yes.
at least for that time, and that is paid off because again, at least where we are in the tech world that I'm in, it's a pretty small world. And if you fly off the handle, that's probably not a good situation
Yeah.
to be in.
Yeah.
And in fact, there were some changes when I was a manager, and people weren't getting laid off, but they were potentially changing roles, and some of them weren't going to be happy about that. And so a lot of people kind of had an idea what was going to happen. And I basically just said, hey, look, whenever you talk to whoever you talk to, like, just be calm and don't, a few people that were known to fly off the handle, I tried to give that
Hmm.
advice. But anyway,
You
so
definitely have always have a stoic response. I remember one of those times I came to visit you,
uh-huh.
and I was feeling anxious for you. I was feeling nervous for you, and it just that creates a lot of volatility when your income just stops. And I
Yeah, for
remember
sure.
coming to see you, and you were just calm. You were, I don't know, I mean, you weren't like thrilled at
No.
what you were going through. I can't imagine, but you weren't worrying about it. You're like, something will come up, something will
Yeah.
happen, we'll move forward, and it has.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's
That's
funny
always been
that
kind of your
it's
approach.
and it's always been better than I anticipated. It's always been ultimately a good thing. It's been hard, it wasn't easy, obviously, but
Yeah.
ultimately it's been better for my career, which is weird. That's partially my fault for not like being a little too loyal. This is a different subject, but anyway, um, it's been it's always been good, and so I always try to have that attitude. Like I'm kind of the philosophy that like things happen for a reason, and you're gonna deal with them, and then you do the best you can and be positive, and things will work out. So anyway,
It's the only way to move forward. Once you just have that acceptance of the situation,
yeah.
get past, just move past all the emotions.
Yeah, not that you shouldn't have emotion, but like, yeah, it's
No,
anyway.
no
You know,
emotion.
you know what I mean.
Just
Stiff upper lip. All right, so what do you
uh,
rate the book? Because this is something you're going to read over and over. You're going to read every year, it sounds like. And this is a
yeah,
book that I intend to read. I just haven't done it yet. So
there's a reason why it is quoted often. There's a lot of
yeah.
quotes. Like I'll share two more. He says something like, "Imagine you are dead. Now go live the rest of your life."
Hmm.
Like at any moment, he says you can leave your life right now. Let that determine what you do and what you say and what you think. Tomorrow, I might not wake up tomorrow, Matt.
Well, I
This
hope you
could be it
do.
for me. This might be my last podcast ever.
Yeah. See
So
that?
if you think of it that way, like my little corruptible body and my little soul could just be
Yeah.
over today. How do I want to leave this world, you know?
So that reminds me of a quote that this is maybe more along the lines of like maybe you're being hard on yourself, you made a mistake or did something stupid, which is very common for me. And it's from Shakespeare, and it's think not I am the thing I was. And it's like, okay, you know what? Like I screwed up or whatever. I can do better now. Like I can just basically from this point on, like I can be a different person, I can be better, I can improve. And I've always liked that quote. Think not I am the thing I was. So
Yeah, I love that.
that's what
So
that reminds me of.
That's a great quote from Shakespeare.
Yeah.
I rated a home run. Highly recommend
Okay.
it.
Okay.
I think it's just a great way to live your life. And the more I read it, the more I just find myself trying to embed some of those principles in my own life.
Cool. Yeah,
Stress
I'm
comes,
definitely
I just swallow it, I
just
absorb it, and
just
then move
roll with the
forward.
punches. Roll with the
Yeah.
punches. You know what's funny? Another little mini tangent. I I feel like the older I get, the more I realize like, oh, you have just have some more experience. You're like, you know what? It's gonna be okay. Like things are gonna work out. Even you've been through some obviously very rough times, and so you know what I mean. Like you're like, you know what? Things are okay. Like you just have that understanding that things are gonna pass and you're gonna be okay. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just been interesting as I have gotten old, like becoming an old man. But anyway, this is a thought.
I
So
wish I would have had this book in high school. I wish this
interesting.
was a book that they made you read in 12th grade. Like as you
Yeah,
leave high school into life, that would have been great.
yeah. It's funny. I bought. Maybe I'll talk about this later, but I have a little present for my boys who are young adults, and I think it's the way to wealth from Benjamin Franklin. Have you read that? It's really
Oh,
short.
no, but I've read his biography,
Okay,
and
so
there's a ton of that stuff in there from
yeah,
Benjamin Franklin.
because it's from his like almanac or whatever.
Yep.
But it's a really short. It's like a tiny little book, but I think it's a really cool. Anyway, I'll have to let you know what they think of that. I'm like force them to read it or
Can
bribe
I
them or
share
something.
can I
Yeah,
share a
go ahead.
story about Benjamin Franklin?
Please.
Before he died, he put a trust together. He funded the trust with $5,000, and it was only to be used for education and progress. So people could take a loan and pay it back at a 5% interest rate. That was the rate that he set.
Hmm.
And this money, it was to never be distributed. So it just has like compounded and compounded. And the funds from that $5,000 are still going on today. Isn't that
Really?
crazy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where do you? That is
Like
crazy,
the foresight of Benjamin Franklin. He's like, oh, I'm going to put
dude.
five thousand
He's
dollars
we
here.
we we should do a double header for sure on him. He's
Okay,
pretty
let's do it.
unbelievable. Yeah, that'd be. Yeah, like I actually
I'm
started to
game.
listen. I started to listen to his autobiography,
Yeah.
and it's
Oh,
his
his
writings.
autobiography.
Yeah, so I started to listen to that, and it's pretty rough. Just it's not rough. It's the way he writes is a little old timey. So you're kind of like
Yeah.
it like takes my brain a little bit more processing power than you know what I mean. Like
You want a
the
great book to read about him?
yeah, sure.
Walter Isaacson.
Okay, that's probably what I should do. His autobiography was just a little. Again, I like to listen to stuff, but it's like I had to like in my mind, I'm like, wait, how did he say that? Okay, he said that backwards, and that's so weird. It's all kind
Yeah.
of like reading Shakespeare, but it almost seemed worse than reading Shakespeare to me. Anyway, all right, cool. All right, it's my turn. Are you ready for this?
Okay, let's have it.
We
Let's go.
had Mayor Tom Westmoreland, right?
Yep.
And he did a Charles Duhigg book called The Power of Habit, and I think did you end up reading that as well? I know I read it or
I
both
did.
listened to it. Yeah,
I
yeah,
did.
and I
It was
loved it.
good.
I thought it was great. And so I found his second book called Smarter, Faster, Better, and it's basically the science of productivity. Um, and
Hmm.
it's basically how do people and organizations do more, but with like less stress? How do they be more productive? Like, but the science behind it, basically. So a lot of the studies and stuff you've heard from your guy. What are your guys' names? Your two main guys that you always quote. Oh man.
Amos Tversky
Yeah,
and
yeah,
Daniel
diverse. Some of
Kahneman.
some of those some of those types of
Thinking fast
studies.
and slow. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
some of
yeah.
those guys or versions of stuff that's uh, I don't know. You know what I mean? Um.
Yeah.
Anyway, so some of the psychology you've heard a little bit. Obviously, it seems like there's some of those things repeat. But basically, there's eight different things. Let me just read it to you. So there's motivation, goal setting, focus, mental models, team dynamics, innovation, managing others, and decision making. Um, I really quite enjoyed probably I like the whole book. Don't get me wrong. But towards the end with innovation and managing others and decision making, I guess decision making was good. Team dynamics I didn't love, but like basically the motivation and goal setting and focus were all really interesting to me, and mental models was also interesting. And I like the style that he does. It's pretty cool. He'll tell you like a third of a story, and then he'll just start and he'll say like, okay, number two, and then he'll tell you a third of a story that seems totally unrelated, and then he'll go back to the second part of the the second part of the first story, and then he kind of
Uh-huh.
like puts them together. So for example, he talks, I think it's in mental models, he talks about um this airplane crash that like happened, and how the but the way he does it is just like, here's a short version of this. Here's something else that relates and or doesn't, you don't know what relates. And then here's a different version. And then he kind of ties them together at the end. And it's kind of cool how he does it, and it keeps you intrigued because you're like, okay, what happened
Engaged.
in the story? Yeah.
Yeah.
And then how does he thread these together? And anyway, so I'll just go over a couple things that I thought were really interesting. The mental models one was kind of interesting in that he basically talks about with the airplane crash, he goes pretty in depth of how this thing happened and how people studied that crash so that it didn't happen again. And basically people, if people have these mental models in their mind of like, okay, what can go wrong? Like what is it my day supposed to look like at work or whatever? And then like, okay, it's supposed to be this, this, and this. And if something is out of place, if you think about it ahead of time, like, okay, what would be out of place? What seems like it's in place? And so because people had studied this crash, there was a similar situation with a different plane, but the guy had studied the crash previously, and so he said before, like before they even took off, something was slightly different because he was going to be watched over by somebody like one of his superiors to see how he's doing. He's like, that's not how we do things. So that well, let's do it this way or that way. You know what I mean? Like he was basically like, this isn't
Hmm.
the way I envisioned it because this is the way it's supposed to be. So he's hyper aware of things that can go wrong, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was interesting. I thought that was pretty interesting. Motivation. I mean, that's kind of like uh, basically, especially in group settings, like if you're autonomous, like or sorry, work settings, you probably have better. You basically make people so that they can make the right choices and make the choices easier, things like that. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on that one. The goal setting one was really interesting. He gives some cool stories about how about SMART goals. You've heard SMART goals before, and he
Yeah. Was it
basic,
specific, measurable,
yeah,
attainable? Uh, what's the R?
yeah. Remember reporting? Oh,
Specific, relevant,
relevant,
and
and time bound.
time bound. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so he talks about at the he basically kind of rips apart IBM, like how they were so awesome and when they first were around. And then no, maybe it was GE. I can't remember. It doesn't matter. Anyway, this company that was awesome forever. And then they said, let's somebody in the 70s said, oh, SMART goals are the way to go. Sorry, before they when they were awesome back in the day, it was basically like if you were my manager, I just said, here's my contract for the year. Here's what I'm going to accomplish, Zach, this, and this, and I'm going to write it up in a letter, and I'm going to talk to you about it, and you're going to agree or disagree or change things. And then basically that's kind of our contract, so to speak. And then eventually this whole SMART goal thing came around, and they implemented it, and like suddenly everything just not suddenly, but over the next 20 years, like things kind of just their business wasn't as good. And they're like, why is this? Like, we've got these SMART goals, they're supposed to be great. Basically what he says is that people would make goals just so they could kind of check the box. Like it was just your daily tasks. Like one lady's job I think it was at GE, I could be wrong, said her job was just to order office supplies. So she's like, okay, I'm going to order them, and I got to order them by the 5th of March, and then I'm going to do this and this. And it's like this is just a normal basic thing, instead of having like this, instead of like being innovative or really trying to accomplish something.
Yeah.
And that's what they and then he talks about how stretch goals are better. Like so your stretch goals, like that's kind of what they were doing initially, is like, okay, here's the all the crazy things I'm going to really try to accomplish, Zach. And yeah, I get it, if I don't do this number one, that's fine because I'm going to hit number two, three, four, and they're really hard to get or whatever. But what he says is the best way to do it is to have a stretch goal and then have a smart goal behind it. And then so like little and again, miniature goals. We've heard this before, breaking a goal into
Hmm.
parts.
Hmm.
But basically, like, here's this really tough thing I'm going to do, but here's how I'm going to do it. Is basically what he goes through.
So
So it's a
for that
combination of the
lady,
two.
so for the lady who's like ordering office supplies, her stretch goal would be, how can I create a system that automatically orders the supplies that we need?
Right. Or it saves us 5% of,
Make the process better.
yeah, how can I
Yes.
say I'm
Get
gonna
better
my goal
vendors
is
or
to save,
bulk or
yeah,
yes.
yeah, exactly. Something
Yeah.
that makes sense in
Yeah.
her realm rather than like, oh, here's all the things I'm gonna check the box on. And it basically like people they said they would sometimes write smart goals and then just like they would do a task and then say, okay, cool, I'm just retroactively make a smart goal about it. You know, like
Oh,
it's just like,
jeez.
okay, I
That's
just need
kind
to
of
check the box.
pointless.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So it was kind of interesting because you've heard so much about smart goals, and I get why you do them, but he basically says like you need to have like a stretch goal before that, or at least that's where the most productive things come from.
Here,
Um,
can
Go
I
ahead.
just make a comment?
Yeah,
So
sure.
uh, I have goals. Let's just take
Yeah,
work. I have
sure.
goals. I have a really a really hard, long goal that's going to take a lot of effort, a lot of time to get there. And then I break it down into a 5-year goal. I've got a 1-year goal. But here's my approach, Matt, to attaining goals. Activity. So you need to be doing the thing, whatever it is. You may not be perfect at it, but you need to be actively engaging in. Maybe you want to qualify for the Boston Marathon. You need to be running every day. You need to be stretching. You need to be out
Right.
there. Maybe you need better shoes. So I think activity is critical. The second thing is you need the most area of surface area for luck. You need to
Hmm.
be involved in different categories within that goal, building your knowledge set, making
Hmm.
introductions, reaching out to people you think would never respond to you, networking, so that everybody knows that you're doing that thing,
Hmm.
right? And as soon as the opportunity comes along. So I don't feel like my goals are smart. I
Okay.
look at it more like there's a cosmic bank, and if I put activity in there, I put the effort in, and if I'm doing the effort in the right areas, eventually the outcomes are going to come back to me.
Yeah.
Maybe I should be more specific.
Um, so it's interesting you say that because I I've been thinking, right? What if somebody wanted me to talk? I'm not the most successful person in the world by any stretch, but I've had some successes in my life, and I feel like I have a pretty happy, good life that I enjoy. What would I encourage people to do? And to me, a big thing is goals and like having goals. And it's been really interesting to me. I love I don't know if you've read some of Brian Tracy's stuff, but he's kind of one of the first guys I ever read about goals. And I love his quote. He says, "Success is goals, the rest is commentary." And I'm a big believer in that. And it's really funny. It's been really interesting to see. Sometimes I'll write down like, okay, here's what my goal is for sales, right? My quota or whatever it is, because I'm in sales. And it's been really interesting to see like how I almost get exactly that. Like just random things throughout the year. You don't think you're going to get it, all of a sudden you do. You know what I mean? That's been really interesting. But I always remember this really interesting story because that was kind of already in my mind. Like right, like I've already kind of had this, like you said, the cosmic bank, right? If you
Yes.
like, and again, this is not like the secret where you're like, oh, I'm just going to manifest it to my life. I think it's stupid. Like you got to do something, like you were saying. But
I'm
one,
probably more like that. I'm probably more like the secret
yeah,
kind of
okay,
mindset.
well, but you work. I know you work, so don't be, you know what I mean? Like that's maybe you could be more specific or whatever. But let me just tell you this quick story because this is
Okay.
interesting to me. Many moons ago when I was in college, I was on the mock trial team. And the mock trial team is basically you have like a fake trial. So imagine like Law and Order, but everything's not real and you're just practicing being an attorney. I wasn't an attorney. I was more just because I used to do some acting and stuff. I was a witness and basically like, I basically had an affidavit that I would have to stick to. Like here's my version of the story. Here's what happened. Here's what happened. Anyway, whatever. And you would compete and we would compete with all the different colleges in the US. And we went against like some really like amazing college. Like we went against Cornell in the nationals, and it's like, and I went to Little
I
Weber
didn't I
State,
didn't know
right?
that.
Oh,
I
you
didn't
didn't
know
know
that.
that? Yeah, so
Whoa.
we
You went
competed.
against Cornell in a
Yeah,
national debate team?
well, it's called a mock trial. So
Okay, mock trial.
mock trial is
That's
what it's called. So
Weber's Matt Liggett from Weber
we were
State.
state, yeah. So
That's
like
awesome.
yeah, it was. So we luckily we had a great coach. He was awesome, but it was funny. The only reason I even did it is because my sister said, "Oh, you should do this because you used to do acting," and because I wasn't going to be an attorney, right? But basically, like everyone's kind of playing a role. The attorney's asking me questions, and I've got to somewhat improvise. This is way too long of a story. The point is, we're competing. We got to first in regionals. You got to qualify for nationals, and we qualify for nationals. Little Weber State, right? Like not a big school. Um, and and my I remember very specifically the second year that we went to nationals, our coach said he said our goal is to get top 10 in the nation. Like that's our goal. Little Weber State be top 10 in the nation. So
Yeah.
we compete. We go to it's held in Des Moines, Iowa. We go. We have and we had a great group. We practice hard, all that stuff. And we get there and we compete against places like DePaul and Cornell and University of Maryland and Texas and just these big, these bigger schools. And again, we're Little Weber State. And we took 10th in the nation.
No way.
And yeah, which was really cool. And we're like all stoked and excited because like, dude, we took like Little Weber State just took 10th in the nation. That's crazy. Because like think about that like in football or in whatever else, especially like Weber State. And it was really interesting because because we were celebrating, but then he kind of reflected. He's like, yeah, you know what? Our goal was 10th. He's like, I should have put our goal as first. Like it was really interesting to me that like we hit the actual number
Go.
that he had set as
Mm-hmm.
our goal.
Yes. Yeah.
And you got to, and I always kind of wonder, like, did he say if he said fifth, if he said top five, if he said number one, what would he be? Funny thing is, he ended up going to a really small college. He ended up taking national and winning a national championship in mock trial, our coach,
That is
which is really
fantastic.
cool. But it was just really interesting to me. I just vividly remember, us taking 10th and him saying, man, I should have had our goal as first. So anyway, that's why I've always been a kind of not always, but that's just one of the things that has always been interesting to me about goals is just there's something about writing it down and then working towards them that there's just something magical about goals and trying. And obviously, you have to work on them. I'm not
I
a big
think if you
like manifest it.
okay, I well in an organization, if you have the wrong people on the bus,
Sure,
it doesn't matter what goal you give them, how
right.
smart the goal is. It, all of that in my mind is just it is pointless.
Yep, I
What
understand,
you
and
know,
I agree. I agree. I think that's again back to the book. He does talk about that, right? Like having like giving them autonomy, finding the right people for from an organizational standpoint, and then letting them be innovative and do their thing. But obviously, if you hire a goofball that isn't going to work, then that's not going to help you. You know what I mean? You're not going to
or somebody that they don't love their job, they don't love what they do,
right.
they are in the wrong role or they're in the wrong company,
Sure,
and yeah, I just like it's funny to me when someone says, "Here's your goal for next year." I'm like, "Do you know who you're talking to?
right,
Do you know what my goals are?"
right,
Like,
right.
my goal is
Double that.
I don't even know if it's attainable, but I'm
Right.
gonna work like crazy to get there, And
Yeah.
but I do think it's good to have goals, whatever you're doing. If you're motivated, you're gonna. I think the biggest problem is setting a goal that's too small. We often
Yeah.
in life say, "Gosh, if I could just save $1 million, why not save 5 million or
Right.
10 million?
Hmm.
What would it take to do that?"
Right.
And I think the more you think like that, the more likely you are to get your million.
And that's what he's talking about with the stretch goals. Basically, like
Yeah.
you might not get this, but if you do, that's pretty freaking amazing. And then
Yes.
the smart part of it is how are you going to do it, right? So if you set like I know you have some big goals. If you set something like higher than that, that's truly a stretch for you, like let's just say next year. You're like, okay, this is going to be really hard, but it's doable, and here's how. Like again, you're pretty active doing your work and everything, but you might say, you know what, it's going to take me an extra, like maybe you just figured out it's going to take me an extra 5 phone calls, an extra X number of networking things. Does that make sense? Like, what are the specific things you might need to do to help you get there? Anyway, I just thought it was kind of
Yeah.
interesting. Um, the other thing that I don't know if it was in this book or not this book, but there was something another cool thing about goals that I it's worth mentioning since we're on the topic. There's some study that was like you scientifically have a better chance of attaining your goal if instead of just writing the goal, you then write like, okay, what could go wrong where I couldn't reach this goal? Like you think, what are the pitfalls? What are some of the things that would
Hmm.
make me not reach this, right? So for example, if you're trying to get in shape and lose weight, right? Like, well, what are some of the pitfalls? Well, eating out every weekend, right? Or pounding the pizza or whatever, or not going to the gym often enough. Like, what are some of the pitfalls you can kind of be aware of is also again, I think it was in a different book, but it just kind of happened to relate. I thought it was pretty interesting as long as the goal stuff. Anyway, I'm not going to get team dynamics. Who cares? Innovation was interesting. How to foster innovation, and what was it was kind of interesting. He basically just talks about how a lot of things are just copies or like another version of something else. Like they take one thing and then they kind of put it in a different place, like kind of a fish out of water almost, or like it reminded me a bit of Hamilton, right? I'm not a huge Hamilton fan by any means. I actually hate all musicals, but like, the musical Hamilton, right? Like
Oh yeah,
it's
yeah.
it's like rap but it's like history. Like those things do not go together, but it was obviously a very successful musical, and it's partially because it's so wacky, like two wacky things, and that's what we talk about with innovation. Anyway, the point is, it was really cool. It's basically all about how do you become more productive and how does your organization become more productive. And I'm reading this thinking like, okay, well, like that's great, but some of these things are kind of hard to do. And what I really loved is at the very end, he talks about how he's like, okay, I'm writing this book about being super productive. And he's like, but I'm not like following him that well. Like I'm not even like doing what I've been writing about. And he kind of admits it. He was saying I really haven't been doing the stretch goal thing. He's like, I haven't really done that. And but what he said was he was struggling to kind of finish things up or get going. And he talked to his editor, and his editor's like, well, why don't you try to do some of the stuff that you're writing about? And so he talks about how his actual writing process, how he changed it based on the things that he had been learning and studying and stuff. So that was kind of cool because it's like, yeah, okay, this is cool because it's like you can read some book and, oh, this guy must be amazing, and I don't know the guy, but you're thinking like, oh, this guy must be the
Yeah.
most productive guy in the world, and you're like, oh, actually he's just like me, where he's like, oh, you know what, I'm gonna check my email instead of doing the thing I should be doing. And so
Right.
here's what I did to combat that, and here's like it's kind of a nice way for him to like give you examples of how you could apply some of those things in a real world scenario. So anyway, I like that. I thought it was definitely a home run. It made me actually purchase his third book, which is called Super Communicator. So that's
Okay.
little teaser for next time. We'll see how that goes. That just came out, I think, this year. So we'll see how it goes. But yeah, I'm a big fan of this guy's stuff. I think it's really interesting. I like the style that like I said, he breaks the stories down. And you're like, how is he gonna thread these together? And one of the things that was kind of interesting too is that he talks about some of the stories, some of the things that he studied, and he's like, you know what, this didn't make the book because it just didn't make sense for like this situation, or what I mean, like some of the stuff was kind of was not contradictory, but it's like, I don't think this fully fits everything for productive. It might be just kind of be like a one-off or like an anomaly. So it's kind of anyway, I just really I quite like the end of the book where he gets a little bit more personal about how he's applying it. So anyway, home run for
Yeah.
me. I'd highly recommend it. Um, it kind of goes back to our philosophy of like it's cool to read all these things, but what are you going to actually apply to your life
Hmm.
from the stuff
Yes.
that we read?
So
Like,
what are you going to apply from this book? What's the
I
one thing you take away?
Um, I think the most important thing for me is probably having the stretch with the smart because I think I'm not a very detail oriented guy. I'm definitely more of a stretch goal guy, but it's almost like I said, it sounds stupid, but it's almost like there's the magic in that goal of writing it down. But I loved the fact that like I always think smart goals are sort of corny because I've had bosses like, okay, let's write some smart goals. And you're like, okay, well, it's basically me like, well, here's what I wanted to accomplish regardless of a stupid situation that we're doing. But
Yes.
but but here's my relevant and here's my time back. Here's what I'm going to do it when the time I'm going to do it and whatever. But I think if it's like if it's more like a personal thing where like okay, again last year they were almost at the end of the year. I set a goal for myself and there was an insane goal and kind of like a decent goal. And like I didn't hit the insane goal because it was insane. But I hit like three quarters of it. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
so, which was way more than I want, way more than I thought I would even with my regular. If that makes any sense. And that's awesome because it helps me next year. So again, I have an insane goal, and now I'm gonna have to now I just want to break it down more into parts with like the smart part of it. But I definitely also liked the part of like avoiding the pitfalls. Again, I think it's from a different book, but that is what I'm going to apply. Is what's I already have my stretch. It's written up here on my little whiteboard. Um, it's pretty crazy, but how can I do it, and what are the pitfalls? Is what I'm going to apply.
Okay.
So
Okay.
that's but this is also a book I'd like to listen to again because it's really good. So I strongly recommend it.
All right. Awesome. Well, his first one was really good on habits, the
The
power
Power
of
of Habit.
habit.
Agreed.
Yeah. Look at Tom Westmoreland. He got you hooked.
He did.
That's
It
a
was good.
success.
That's what's cool about the podcast is you hear something like I would have never known this guy, right? Obviously, maybe, but you've been
I know.
maybe lucky to get across come across the guy.
We need some more people to pitch some books. And
Yeah,
I think you
it's
gave us one. We're gonna have Nate Thompson back here pretty
yes.
soon.
Hopefully, yeah. We're gonna do a triple header on a book that
Yep.
I really enjoyed.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, definitely. So that let's wrap this up. If you
All
want to be
right.
a guest on the podcast, yeah, definitely come. Let us know. It's not a big deal. Like the people get nervous. We like talk to people, some of our friends, and like come on the podcast. Oh, I wouldn't know what to say. Like, well, I sound like an idiot. So who cares? Just come on the podcast and tell us about the book. And it's all good. With
It's a
that
stretch
said,
goal.
yeah, exactly. That said, we got a reminder of our awesome Blackbird watercolor. Etsy shop is what is it? Black or is it Etsy.com/Blackbird? I don't know. You'll find it. Just look up
I
Blackbird photography.
I want to just say real quick. Oh, there
Yeah,
you. Oh, the
here's
QR
the
code.
QR code if you can get it. I don't know if it'll work on here, but yeah,
Oh,
just
that's
let me
awesome.
quickly show you some of her cards that
So
she's
beautiful.
done. Really, she's really talented. Here's kind of a cool Christmas. If you want some Christmas stuff, I think her landscape stuff is amazing.
Yeah,
Don't
those
tell
are
Cammy,
awesome.
but I'm having her paint something very specific for Cammy's birthday.
Oh,
So
cool. Well, she
anyway,
doesn't listen to the podcast anyway,
yeah,
so it's fine.
exactly. She doesn't, which is hilarious. So like the podcast, subscribe, tell your friends, tell your spouse to listen. Even though our spouses probably don't. I don't know if your spouse does, but um
I don't think so.
oh, kind of sad. Anyway,
She has to listen to me all the time. I was just gonna say, um, before we sign off with those little cards,
yeah.
I didn't realize this, but there are a lot of people that will go stay somewhere and they'll leave a thank you card.
Hmm.
So over the holidays, a nice little leave behind would be
Hmm.
one of these cards.
Oh,
They're
for sure.
just amazing and very personalized. It's not something that you pick up at Walmart.
Yeah, exactly.
I
Exactly.
mean, they're pretty cool.
I completely agree. So all right, check that out. Thanks again to Deja Vega for letting us listen to music. Just a heads up, they are recording a new album in January, so I'm really
All
excited for
right.
that. We'll hopefully have some new music on the podcast at some point. Again, like, subscribe, share the podcast. We enjoy doing it and want as many people to hear it as possible, and hopefully apply some things to their lives that we read in books, or maybe encourage you to read something you wouldn't have read in the past or before. So thanks again. We'll catch you next time on the Pitch Book Podcast.